Minister Doyle, farm leaders, ambassadors, public representatives, farmers and industry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really delighted to be invited here today to address this conference. Of course, as a Kilkenny man, I'm of course very familiar with these surroundings, though we'd prefer our big appearances in September rather than December. Anyway, so Foodwise 2025 is an exciting and ambitious initiative which should serve this country well, particularly when it comes to the critically important task of creating high-quality jobs in our rural areas. And as a former member of the government which steered this country from the verge of bankruptcy back to a more solid economic footing, I am fully aware of the immense contribution that the food industry and our agri-food sector has made to that recovery. Having served as a member of the Oireachtas for over 30 years, representing a large rural constituency in Carlow Kilkenny, which of course has a significant reliance on the agri-food sector, I think I appreciate the value of this sector as a social and economic driver. Our farmers and our food operators are dynamic people. They're outward-looking entrepreneurs, and they have a keen eye for new business opportunities. As policymakers, our role is to support them and give them every chance to succeed, and we should be the wind beneath their wings, as it were. So today I hope to provide a perspective on how Foodwise 2025 can complement the Common Agricultural Policy post-2020. And of course this conference is well timed in that regard, because last Wednesday I had the opportunity of launching the Commission thinking in relation to agriculture of the future and in relation to food. It's not an accident that the title of it is The Future of Food and Farming, and it outlines the vision for a simplified and more modernised CAP for the challenges of the 21st century. The Common Agricultural Policy, of course, can often be taken for granted. It has been a huge success since 1962, and it has served Ireland well in its almost 45 years of membership. Last week's communication reflects a policy that is evolving to meet the demands and challenges of today. We had a public consultation, which is quite interesting. Normally you get 5,000 or 6,000 submissions. On this occasion, for some reason, we got 323,000. So there's big interest in food and farming. And the stakeholders and the people who have an interest in food and farming are making their voices heard. But a majority of the people and farmers and those who decided to make their submissions believe that the CAP could do more, particularly in terms of environment and climate challenge. But of course they do also see the value of this policy, of course, for its main work, which is food security. While there's a lot that we are changing, there are important elements in this particular policy that we are maintaining. These are elements that have worked well. For example, we are maintaining the existing two-pillar structure with direct support to farmers in order to guarantee income support, and a strong rural development pillar which helps to ensure the vitality of our rural areas. This provides a level of certainty and security to our farmers and will therefore provide a solid foundation for Foodwise to succeed. If we don't have the farmer, we won't have the product for the industry. And Foodwise 2025 projects that Irish agri-food exports have the potential to grow to 19 billion euros per annum in value by 2025. This is a figure, of course, that would represent an 85% increase from the current three-year average. And this export growth will be driven primarily by expansions in dairy, beef, seafood, and consumer food and drinks. Coincidentally, international trade now means that the EU has turned a negative trade position into a 19 billion euro surplus. I'm a bit like the Chinese ambassador. That's since I arrived on the scene. I will continue harnessing trade to bolster our farm incomes, because good food, sustainably produced, means good business. And I know that in this endeavour I have the full support of the Department and its agencies and the wider agri-food community. Global demand for high quality, high value, highly nutritious products will grow in tandem with the ever-increasing global middle class, and Ireland is certainly well placed to meet that demand. Global consumption of dairy products, to give just one example, is expected to increase at an annual rate of 1.8% with the highest growth expected in the Asian countries. And this is why I have been travelling a fair bit around the world in the last year and a half to find new markets for our agri-food products, whether it is in China or Japan, or whether it is Colombia or Mexico, or Canada or Saudi Arabia and Iran. I was particularly pleased to be joined on missions by over 40 of the best European agri-food companies, including a number from Ireland. And I know too that Minister Creed has just returned from a trade mission to Japan and South Korea. This is the type of diplomatic offensive that helps to ensure that the doors are open for you, and you have then the opportunity of doing the business. So we have to fight for our shelf space. It doesn't happen by accident. So we have to have a competitive environment in order to ensure that our agri-food businesses are able to sustain the type of activity that will meet your targets for Food-Wise 2025. But I want to strike a cautionary note as well. While the level of ambition set out in your strategy is very impressive and indeed challenging, we must also ensure that supply and demand are in balance if we want to make the most of a policy that is built around strong market orientation. True balance can only be achieved when operators make their business decisions based on market signals. And Food-Wise 2025 should make this principle its baseline for its growth ambitions. EU milk deliveries increased by 440,000 tonnes in September 2017, with growth particularly notable in Ireland, in France and in Germany. And this is the opposite of heeding market signals. I made this point strongly 2 weeks ago when I addressed a large gathering of dairy operators in Punchestown. I was used to going racing in Punchestown. I didn't think I'd have to meet dairy farmers in it, but anyway. I pointed out that in the Netherlands, Friesland Campina has written to suppliers calling for restraint in production. I believe that it is very important that industry acts in concert across all EU member states to manage the supply side. Policymakers have a responsibility also in this regard. In a similar way, when it comes to the issue of skim milk powder stocks, we have to manage our public intervention from two angles. First, how to realistically proceed with the release of the existing stocks, because the stocks have to be sold at some stage. And second, how to prevent any further build-up next year and to do it in a way that we can manage the market for the farmer. In relation to skim milk powder stocks, the product has to be sold, as I said, but we also need to avoid buying in under public intervention next year without due market justification. So the European Union does not exist just to provide another outlet for a product for which a commercial market cannot be found. That's your job. So we're entering the key negotiation period for the next European budget. And the CAP is going to come under some pressure again, as probably you know. You all understand the implications of Brexit, which is blowing a huge hole in the overall EU budget. The Commission's communication acknowledges that there are a number of new challenges that are on the horizon for which money will be required. And in this context, all the spending policies, including the CAP, will come under scrutiny. Now, if I am going to be in the strongest possible position to defend the CAP, which currently amounts to around €58 billion per annum, I cannot go to those negotiations with my fellow commissioners, or indeed with some member states and members of the European Parliament, with 500,000 tonnes of skim milk powder in storage. I need all stakeholders to understand and strongly support the narrative that I'm trying to construct for the policy, which is that a smart, sustainable, market-orientated agri-food sector can contribute to multiple political commitments of the Juncker Commission. And these are in the areas of boosting quality employment and growth and investment in our rural areas, harnessing the potential of the European Union's energy union, the circular economy and the bioeconomy. The bioeconomy has huge potential, and I want to see farmers and our co-ops and our businesses making sure that they're part of these particular plans of the future in the bioeconomy and the circular economy. Otherwise, it will be outside investors from the industry that will get the benefits from all of these activities rather than the farmer or the agri-food business. How do we bring research and innovation from the laboratories onto the farms or into our agri-business through better innovation? And how do we fully connect farmers and our rural communities to the digital economy? So these are the priorities of the Juncker Commission, some of them of which fit nicely into the commitments that you have in Food 25. If Ireland commits to meeting these priorities, it will hugely accelerate your ability to implement your food-wise targets. The communication on the future of the CAP makes no bones about the clear need for the European agri-food sector to do more when it comes to meeting the Union's ambitious environment and climate agenda. To meet this challenge, we have to overhaul radically the way that we deliver our agri-food sector's green contribution. We have concluded that you cannot do that with a one-size-fits-all. And when you have a union of 500 million people with significant differences in farm structures, production systems and climatic conditions, it's impossible to have a common agricultural policy in the context of having everybody doing the same thing. What works around Kilkenny may not always work in the olive groves of Catania in southern Italy, or what works for any president of a farm organisation may not work for a goat farmer in Greece. So there is broad agreement among farmers and our stakeholders that the current CAP greening system does not do what it says on the tin. Instead, we are taking a bold step to give Member States greater subsidiarity, greater decision-making, to decide on the most appropriate interventions in their view that will meet EU-wide and EU-level objectives, while respecting local conditions and circumstances. So we're giving Member States, and we're giving policymakers and farmers and everybody in the business a chance to say how would you, in your circumstances in Ireland, be able to help meet the EU-wide objectives, rather than imposing a rules-based, compliance-based approach that we have in Brussels at the moment, where the width of the tree or the distance from one tree to the other seems to be more important than actually performance or results. So we're shifting from a rules-based, compliance-based approach to a performance results-based approach. Member States will design their own CAP strategic plans to meet the EU-wide objectives, and you have to get approval, of course, from the European Commission, because we have to maintain a level playing pitch for everybody, no distortions of competition, and respect the internal market. We will monitor then the progress towards achieving these results, and we'll step in where appropriate. Nothing concentrates the mind more than saying we're going to withhold some money on you if you don't actually meet your targets. But anyway, in the spirit of subsidiarity, this places greater responsibility and accountability closer to home and closer to the point of delivery. And I'm sure that Minister Creed and Secretary-General O'Driscoll will meet this challenge with relish. Measures which fit better to local conditions will deliver better environmental and climate results. The agricultural sector urgently needs to step up to the plate and deliver more when it comes meeting the COP21 targets and the Sustainable Development Goals. Clear and measurable targets will be built into the national CAP action plans, and failure to meet them will result in penalties. Foodwise 2025 correctly recognises that a significant increase in food production cannot be considered in isolation to the environmental impact, particularly in relation to the depletion of our natural resources and the potential impact on climate change. But there is a gulf between this welcome rhetoric and the operational reality, I'm sorry to say. The Environmental Protection Agency has warned that Ireland needs to adopt a much greater sense of urgency about reducing its dependence on fossil fuels, after official figures showed a 3.5% increase in greenhouse gas emissions last year. Ireland is one of only 4 countries in the European area where greenhouse gas emissions are still above 1990 levels. A failure to tackle this issue could cost the country large sums of money in relation to carbon credits by 2020. And we are sleepwalking towards further EU fines under the Renewable Energy Directive by our lack of investment in the grid. The risks of failing to address our environmental challenges are not abstract. They are real and they can be counted in hard currency. If I take, for example, the Netherlands as a cautionary tale for you today, the Dutch dairy industry has been dealing with a phosphorus problem for the past year, which has resulted in the slaughter of 50,000 cows to meet their targets. We don't want the Irish situation to be like that in the future, so we have to plan properly. The Dutch are currently negotiating their derogation under the Nitrates Directive, a derogation which is worth up to €1 billion to the Dutch dairy industry. And in recent weeks it has been revealed that controls need to be tightened, which places enormous pressure on the Dutch government and the Dutch industry. So Ireland has to wake up and wake up soon to the reality that we are part of a European Union that has assumed the role of global leader in climate challenges. President of the European Council, Mr. Tusk, a good friend of Ireland, as you know, said that in relation to Brexit, we are all in this together. Ní neart go cóir le chéile, he said last Friday. And that is equally true of climate challenge. Yet in the recently published Climate Change Performance Index, Ireland fell 28 places to 49th out of 56 countries. Of course, I accept that this is not a reflection of any one sector, not least the agri-food sector. But all economic actors must play their part and implement policies, including those related to the agri-food sector, if we are to catch up to ensure that targets are met. Again, the most recent EPA figures are sobering, showing an increase in agricultural emissions last year by 2.7%, following a 1.5% increase in 2015. So I'm making these points in order to alert you today that Food-Wise 2025 and these particular targets have to be integrated. Improved environmental performance on farm, notably through nutrient management and the enhanced use of precision agriculture, can make a difference. And the CAP will incentivise farmers in the future to move in this direction. So we're going to give you some help to try and achieve these objectives in these particular areas. Now, in relation to carbon sequestration, Ireland needs to reboot its afforestation policies and start making real headway in this area. Minister of State Doyle has addressed this issue recently, noting that there appears to be a stigma amongst farmers when it comes to planting land with forestry. And he's right. The proof for the pudding is in the eating. Indeed, in a Dáil debate, Minister Doyle said that this fear factor must be eliminated for landowners so they can look at options for their land and assess its value. Forestry represents a key sector in the transition towards a low-carbon and climate-friendly economy, and it is critical that sustainable forestry strategies are developed hand in hand with sustainable food security solutions. Of course, this is as true for the rest of Europe as it is for Ireland. But I am making the point at this conference to remind you that the day has gone where we can pay lip service to sustainability and climate action. At the very minimum, it's essential that the afforestation targets set out in the Forestry Programme 2014 to 2020 are fully met. Now, I was interested in what the panel discussion was before I came on, and the references to opening new market opportunities. And there has been a lot of trade missions that I've mentioned already, but a number of free trade agreements. And I want to thank the ambassadors of China and indeed Asia generally for the huge contribution that they have made to buying our high-quality goods from Ireland and the European Union in recent years. Were it not for these markets in Asia, we would have a significant oversupply of our products, and I don't know what the price would be for any of our farmers at the marketplace were it not for these opening of these new high-quality markets. So we thank them very sincerely for that. And we build on the relationship with China and Japan and Vietnam, Singapore, and in the future in Indonesia. We build on the relationships we're building with Mexico and Canada. Of course, we have some difficulties as well with a trade negotiation on Mercosur. But of course, in the true tradition of the European system, we'll try and make sure we get a balanced outcome, one that favours the European Union. Take time anyway. We have to take a little bit of time about this one, I think. But we certainly understand that there are offensives and defensives in the marketplace, and this is one where the full back line has to be playing well. Before I finish, Anya, I want to refer, of course, not to the elephant in the room, but of course Brexit. Today is obviously a very important day in these negotiations, and I don't propose to get into details, as you'd expect, on discussions that are ongoing in Brussels or in Dublin or in London or Belfast. However, you're all familiar with the huge challenge, and it has been mentioned by the panel. Brexit poses a serious problem for this country in relation to agri-food exports. And of course, we can only do so much on diversification. But diversification takes a bit of time. And we have to give some assistance at European level to the countries that are worst affected or most affected by the outcome of whatever will happen in relation to Brexit. We want to see a very good, close relationship between the European Union and the UK when it comes to trade. It's a win-win scenario for both sides. When you see 47% of our agricultural trade from Ireland to the UK, but also the significant amount of trade that the United Kingdom does with the rest of the European Union, you will see that it is in all our interest to have a common sense approach and to ensure that the diversification word, even though it's a valuable part of the narrative, that we are able to maintain, as the speakers have said on the panel, as much as we possibly have on the island of Ireland and the islands of Great Britain and Ireland in terms of trade. So the challenge is, if frictionless means anything, whether it is the UK or whether it is the European Union, we should be aiming for frictionless trade and a common sense approach to the future relationship between the EU and the United Kingdom. I want to reiterate that the European Commission recognises and commends Ireland's ambitious plans for growth in the agri-food sector. There are opportunities, but of course I've mentioned some challenges. There are emerging markets with rapidly rising population and middle-class incomes which are demanding the high-quality food products from Ireland and the European Union. The European Union is the best address for high-quality food anywhere in the world, and the European Union and Irish producers are, therefore, well placed to meet this growing demand. And as trade relationships deepen, our partners will also benefit with increased EU investment in our partner countries. Through the Commission's communication and Foodwise 2025, there is no lack of ambition for the agri-food sector here in Ireland or indeed across the EU. My services and I are working daily to imbue the CAP with a similar sense of a dynamic sector, of an ambitious sector that has been articulated through Foodwise 2025. And what you can do for your Irish industry, we hope to replicate that as far as possible in the European Union. Our shared challenge is to ensure that the undoubted potential for growth does not come at the expense of sustainability. That's what the consumers of Asia, that's what the consumers around the world are looking for. That challenge proves the value of Origin Green programmes with the goal of sustainable food production. This is not alone important for the environment and the world we live in, but increasingly demanded from our more discerning consumers. Quality food will always win out. So I will leave it now to the real experts here in the room to thrash things out for the future, but I reiterate my congratulations to all of those associated with the production of Foodwise 2025, to thank the Minister for Agriculture and his team in Agriculture House for putting together this conference so that we can certainly look at the economic opportunities, the environmental challenges, but also the potential that there is for the future from Irish Foodwise 2025. Thank you.